The airport buzzed with life, children giggling, announcements echoing, the rhythmic tapping of suitcase wheels against the tile floor. I clutched my husband's arm, my heart light with anticipation. This vacation had been my dream for years. No work, no distractions, just us, escaping the ordinary. We arrived early, picked up our tickets, and wove through security. I couldn't stop smiling, stealing glances at my husband. He seemed distracted. His eyes flicked to his phone often, fingers drumming against his thigh. But I dismissed it. Maybe he was just as anxious as I was, eager for our getaway. Finally, we boarded. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as we settled into our seats. The excitement in my chest softened into a pleasant warmth. And then, she appeared. The stewardess. Blonde, elegant, with a practiced smile that had probably melted hearts across countless flights. Her uniform fit snugly, her heels clicking confidently as she moved. My husband sat up straighter as she approached, his hand dropping from my grasp. "Good evening," she greeted, her eyes lingering on him just a second too long. I felt it instantly. A spark, something unspoken, charged. The way she tilted her head, the way his lips twitched in a barely contained smile. A knowing look passed between them. I knew that look. My stomach tightened, but I told myself I was imagining things. She was just doing her job. He was just being polite. Still, doubt burrowed in, stubborn and unwelcome. As the plane took off, I forced myself to push the feeling away. This was our vacation, after all. Nothing would ruin it. Or so I thought. The flight was smooth, the cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow as passengers settled into the lull of the journey. I tried to relax, to let the hum of the plane soothe me. But I couldn't shake the unease curling in my stomach. She kept coming back. The stewardess. It wasn't unusual for flight attendants to check on passengers, but this felt different. Every time she passed our row, her eyes flicked toward my husband, her lips curling at the corners in a way that made my skin prickle. And my husband, he wasn't helping. He laughed at something she said, his voice lower, warmer. A joke I wasn't in on. I watched as his eyes followed her when she turned, as if drawn by an invisible thread. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He blinked, turned to me as if surprised I was still there. "Yeah, of course. Just enjoying the flight." Liar. A quiet war raged in my head. Was I being paranoid? Was I overanalyzing? The last thing I wanted was to spend our long-awaited vacation fighting over some silly flirtation. But something inside me whispered that this wasn't silly. I decided to let it go. Or at least, I tried. Dinner was served, and for a while, the distraction of warm food and a glass of wine kept me grounded. My husband scrolled through his phone idly between bites, and I leaned against the window, staring out at the inky sky. I felt drained. Maybe it was the stress of traveling, the long lines, the hours of planning. My body ached for sleep, and before I knew it, my eyelids grew heavy. "I think I'm gonna nap," I murmured. He nodded, barely looking up. I sighed, sinking into the quiet darkness of sleep, willing myself to forget the way the stewardess smiled at my husband. But sleep did not bring peace. Because when I woke up, he was gone. A chill ran down my spine as I blinked awake, my mind groggy from sleep. The cabin was quiet, most of the passengers lost in their own dreams. The overhead lights were dimmed, casting everything in a twilight haze. But something was wrong. My husband's seat was empty. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, expecting him to return any second. Maybe he had gone to the restroom. Maybe he just needed to stretch his legs. But as I glanced around, an uneasiness slithered through me. He'd been acting strange all evening. I glanced at the small screen in front of me, still 2 hours until landing. I shifted in my seat, the air suddenly too warm, pressing against my skin. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Panic clawed its way up my throat. Where was he? I unbuckled my seatbelt, standing cautiously so as not to disturb the sleeping passenger beside me. My eyes scanned the aisle, but there was no sign of him. A flight attendant passed by, a different one, a man with tired eyes. I reached out. "Excuse me," I whispered. "Have you seen my husband?" He gave me a polite but uninterested nod. "I'm sure he's just in the restroom, ma'am." I swallowed, nodding, but something told me that wasn't the answer. Because I knew my husband. I knew the way he fidgeted when he was hiding something. I knew the way his voice changed when he lied. And I knew, deep in my bones, I wasn't overreacting. I turned, stepping into the aisle, my heart beat loud in my ears. The restroom doors at the back of the plane were closed. I hesitated, then knocked softly on one of them. No response. I tried the second. Nothing. My skin tingled with something I couldn't quite name. Fear. Suspicion. Dread. And then, just as I was about to turn back, I heard it. A sound. Muffled. Soft. From behind the curtain that led to the service compartment. My pulse quickened. No. I took a step forward, my breath shallow. Then another. The sounds grew clearer. Whispered voices. A soft gasp. A quiet, barely contained laugh. My fingers trembled as I reached for the curtain. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't crazy. Something was happening on the other side of this door. And I was about to find out what. My fingers hovered over the curtain, my breath coming in shallow, uneven bursts. The sounds on the other side weren't loud, but they were enough. Enough to make my stomach twist, enough to make my hands tremble. A hushed giggle. A rustling of fabric. A soft, breathless sigh. I knew that sound. I'd made that sound once. A wave of nausea crashed over me, but I forced myself to move. One step. Then another. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the quiet hum of the plane. I reached the small, silver handle of the service compartment door. My fingertips brushed against the cold metal. Stop. A voice in my head, one that sounded far too much like the woman I used to be, the one who still believed in my husband, in us, begged me to walk away. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe you'll regret opening this door. But I had already lost the luxury of doubt. My husband had been acting strangely all evening. The stewardess had been too familiar. And now, he was gone, hidden behind this door, in the middle of the night, whispering with someone in the dark. I swallowed hard. Then I pushed it open. The dim overhead light illuminated everything in a flash, her back pressed against the narrow wall, my husband's body hovering over hers. His hands gripping her waist, their lips inches apart. Their heads snapped toward me at the same time. Time stopped. For a long, excruciating moment, none of us moved. And then, like a landslide, everything came crashing down. The air in the tiny service compartment was thick, humid with breath, heavy with something I could no longer pretend wasn't real. My husband's hands were still on her waist. The stewardess's lips were still parted, her chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow breaths. And my whole body burned, not with warmth, but with ice-cold clarity. There it was. The proof. The confirmation of every quiet suspicion, every gut feeling I had tried to ignore. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My husband jerked away from her as if my presence had yanked him from a trance. His eyes went wide, his mouth opening, closing, scrambling for an excuse, a lie, something to explain away the undeniable. But there was nothing. The silence between us was louder than any explanation he could have offered. He finally choked out, but I raised a hand, stopping him. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. The stewardess straightened her uniform, her face turning an awkward shade of pink. She smoothed her hair and turned toward the exit, trying to slip past me. Coward. But I wasn't letting her off that easy. "Don't move," I said, my voice eerily calm. She froze. I turned my gaze back to my husband. "How long?" He swallowed hard. "It's not what you think." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Really? Because it sure looks like you were about to." I stopped myself, my stomach turning. "You know what? I don't even care." And suddenly, I didn't. Not about the details. Not about how it started, or when. What mattered was that it had happened. And that I had seen it with my own eyes. He reached for me. "Please, let's just talk." I stepped back. "Don't touch me." Passengers were still asleep just outside this door, unaware that my world had just cracked open. But I was awake now. Wide awake. And there was no going back. The space felt smaller now, closing in on me. The stale scent of airplane air mixed with the faint trace of her perfume, something floral, something nauseating. I couldn't breathe. My husband ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting between me and the stewardess. His face was flushed, his lips slightly swollen. I felt sick. "Sophia," he said, using my name like it would soften the impact of what I had just witnessed. "Let's go somewhere private and talk." I almost laughed. The audacity. Private? My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Oh, you mean like this?" I gestured around the tiny compartment where I had caught him. "I'd say you've had enough privacy for one night." The stewardess shifted awkwardly, glancing at the exit, desperate to escape. "Stay," I snapped, my eyes locking onto her. "Since you clearly have something to say to my husband, you can say it in front of me." She hesitated, and for the first time, I saw something flicker across her face. Regret? Embarrassment? Or just the inconvenience of being caught? "Look, I didn't mean," she started. I turned back to my husband. "How long?" I demanded again. "How long have you been sneaking around behind my back?" His throat bobbed as he swallowed, but he said nothing. The coward. I felt something in me snap. I wasn't the kind of woman who caused scenes, who raised her voice in public. But right now? Right now, I didn't care. My voice was low but sharp as a blade. "You know what's funny?" I knew. I knew something was off. The way you were looking at her, the way she was looking at you. I shook my head, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "I just didn't think you'd be this stupid." His jaw clenched. "Sophia, please, No," my voice cut through the air. "You don't get to please me. You don't get to ask for anything." The stewardess finally found her voice. "Look, I don't want to cause problems." I turned on her, my eyes flashing. "Oh? You don't want to cause problems? Then what exactly do you want?" She blinked, her lips parting, but no words came out. Because we both knew what she had wanted. And she had almost gotten it. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking. My world had just cracked in half at 35,000 feet, and there was no escaping it. Not yet. But I would. Oh, I would. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My husband stood frozen, his mouth slightly open like he wanted to fix this, like there was anything left to fix. The stewardess, his accomplice, his mistake, shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the exit as if she could slip away unnoticed. Not a chance. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. I could feel the weight of my own heartbeat, the sheer force of adrenaline pumping through my veins. My fingers trembled, but my voice? My voice was steel. "I want you to say it," I whispered, my gaze locked onto my husband. "I want you to say exactly what I just walked in on." He shook his head. "Sophia, it's not." "Not what? Not what?" My voice was sharp now, cutting through the thick, recycled air of the cabin. I was done being quiet. Done being reasonable. "Not what it looks like." Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like my husband sneaking around in the dark with another woman. His jaw tightened, his eyes pleading. I swear, it didn't mean anything. I let out a cold, humorless laugh. Oh, well, in that case, I feel so much better. It didn't mean anything. Great. Fantastic. I turned to the stewardess. Hear that? You didn't mean anything. She flinched, her hands twisting in front of her. I didn't know he was married. Liar. I cocked my head, studying her. Really? Because from where I was sitting, it seemed like you knew exactly who he was. And yet, here we are. Her mouth opened, then shut. She had no defense. I turned back to my husband, my voice eerily calm now. Tell me something. He hesitated. What? I took a step closer, close enough to see the sweat beading at his hairline. Did you think I wouldn't wake up? Did you think I'd sleep peacefully while you... My throat closed up, the betrayal slamming into me all over again. He said nothing. Coward. My hands curled into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms. I hope it was worth it, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Because you just threw everything away. His face crumbled. Sophia, please. But I was already backing away, my head held high, my heart shattering with every step. I would not cry. Not here. Not now. But this? This was the moment everything changed. I turned on my heel, shoving the curtain aside as I stepped out of the service compartment. The dim cabin lights barely illuminated the sleeping passengers, their heads tilted against seatbacks, their bodies cocooned in blankets. Oblivious. They had no idea that just a few feet away, my world had collapsed. That my husband, the man I had trusted, the man I had loved, had shattered everything in one reckless, disgusting moment. Behind me, I heard him stumble forward. Sophia, wait. I didn't stop. If I stopped, I might scream. If I stopped, I might break down right here in the aisle, and I refused to let that happen. Not in front of strangers. Not in front of him. A flight attendant, the male one I had spoken to earlier, looked up from his seat near the galley, concern flickering across his face. He must have seen something in my expression, because he started to rise. Ma'am? Is everything all right? I forced a tight smile, even as my vision blurred. Perfect. My voice wavered, and I hated it. Absolutely perfect. I moved past him, my hands trembling as I reached my seat. The small overhead light cast a pale glow over my abandoned book, the blanket I had curled into just an hour ago, before I had woken up to my worst nightmare. Before my husband had disappeared into the dark. Before I had found him. A second later, I heard his footsteps. He slid into his seat beside me, his presence suffocating, unbearable. I turned my face away, staring out at the endless black sky beyond the window. Please, he whispered. Just let me explain. I laughed under my breath, sharp, bitter. Explain what, exactly? My voice was quiet but lethal. That you got bored on our vacation and decided to sneak away to grope a flight attendant? He flinched. It wasn't. Don't. I turned to face him now, my voice low, shaking with fury. Do not sit here and lie to me. Not after I saw you. He dragged a hand down his face, exhaling sharply. It was stupid, okay? I don't even know why I did it. I wasn't thinking. I clenched my teeth so hard it hurt. You were thinking. You were thinking with her. His shoulders slumped. Sophia, I swear, it didn't mean anything. It wasn't. Stop saying that. My voice was sharper than I intended, and a few rows ahead, a passenger stirred. I swallowed hard, lowering my tone. Do you really think that makes it better? That throwing away our entire marriage over nothing is somehow less devastating? He looked down, silent. Of course. There was no excuse that could fix this. No words that could glue back together what had just shattered. I turned away from him again, staring out at the void beyond the window. The rest of the flight stretched before me like an eternity. Sitting next to the man who had just destroyed everything. The hum of the airplane engines filled the silence between us, a dull, constant reminder that I was trapped. Trapped in this seat, trapped in this moment, trapped with a man I no longer recognized. I kept my eyes on the window, my reflection barely visible in the darkened glass. I looked different, hollowed out, stripped of the warmth I had felt just hours ago when this trip had still been ours. Now, it was nothing. Just like us. My husband shifted beside me, his presence heavy, unbearable. "Sophia," he murmured, like he was afraid I'd shatter. Too late. I let the silence stretch, let it swallow him whole. Let him sit in the wreckage of what he had done. He exhaled, rubbing his face. "I know I messed up." I almost laughed. Messed up? Messed up was forgetting to take out the trash. Messed up was leaving a load of laundry in the washer overnight. This was something else entirely. I turned to him, my voice quiet but sharp. "Did you think I wouldn't wake up?" His throat bobbed. I don't know. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" He had no answer for that, either. I tilted my head, studying him, the man I had once trusted with everything. "Or did you just not care?" He flinched. "That's not fair." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, now we care about fairness?" He sighed, leaning back, staring up at the ceiling as if it held an escape. It was nothing. There it was again. That pathetic, meaningless phrase. My fingers curled into fists. "You keep saying that. Like it makes a difference." He turned to me, desperation flickering in his eyes. "Because it's true." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper, venom threading through every syllable. "Then tell me, if it was nothing, why did you do it?" He blinked, mouth opening, but no words came. Because he didn't know. Because there was no good reason. Because this was who he was. I nodded slowly, the final piece clicking into place. Right. I turned away, pressing my forehead against the cool window. The vast emptiness of the sky stretched endlessly before me, an ocean of darkness and stars. I had never felt so alone. But not for long. Because the moment this plane landed, I knew exactly what I had to do. And this time, I would be the one to leave. The hours dragged, stretching unbearably long. Sleep never came, no matter how much I willed my eyes to close. Instead, I sat there, locked in silence, my body rigid with anger, with heartbreak, with the cruel clarity that came when betrayal stripped away every illusion. My husband, no, the man sitting next to me, because that's all he was now, didn't try to touch me again. Maybe he finally understood that there was nothing left to hold on to. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers, announcing our descent. The passengers around us stirred, stretching, rubbing sleep from their eyes, blissfully unaware that the woman beside them had just lost everything. Everything, except herself. As the plane touched down, I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. This was it. The wheels screeched against the runway, and the force of landing jolted me forward, but I was already gone. Already making my exit, already shedding the last remnants of the life I had before I stepped onto this plane. The fasten seatbelt sign blinked off. People began unbuckling, stretching, gathering their bags, murmuring about their plans, their vacations, their reunions with family. I reached for my carry-on, my movements deliberate, controlled. Beside me, he finally spoke. "Sophia, can we just?" I stood. Just like that. No hesitation. No looking back. I stepped into the aisle, blending into the sea of passengers shuffling toward the exit. With every step, my chest grew lighter, my spine straighter. I was done. With the lies. With the betrayal. With him. The flight attendant at the door, the same one who had seen the truth in my face hours ago, gave me a knowing look as I passed. I didn't smile. Didn't nod. Just walked. I stepped into the jet bridge, feeling the warm, humid air rush over me. And then, just like that, I was free.